site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we may meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful, we recognize it with gratitude, the knowledge Smith Falls and contributions that the Algonquin peoples bring to the municipality of Smith Falls. Today, Smith Falls is also home to other Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We extend our respect to all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people for their valuable past and present contributions. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. We'll start the meeting with a roll call. We've got a full slate of council tonight, and I think Chief Cheeseborough, you're acting for CAO Morris. Could you do a roll call for staff, please?
Yes, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have Director of Corporate Services, Carrie Costello, Director of Public Works, Paul Mcmunn, Manager of Economic Development, Julia Crowder, and our Deputy Clerk, Nadine Bennett.
Great, thank you, Chief. So with that, we'll look for amendments to the agenda. Seeing none, we will move to disclosure of monetary interest. No disclosure tonight. We don't have any adoption of minutes or delegations, so we'll move right to CAO directors reports. Chief, I believe, do we have 3 tonight?
We have 3 tonight, and we will start with Director Costello.
Excellent.
Thank you. Just 2 quick reports this evening. The first is a reminder to any organizations out within the town who would like to submit an application for our 2022 Community Donation Municipal Grant Program. The deadline for that is November 30th at 4:30 p.m. So if they would like to be considered in the 2022 budget, they can either contact Deputy Clerk Bennett, myself, or go online to the website and get the application. Again, the deadline is November 30th at 4:30 p.m. for those requests. Second report is regarding our overnight parking permit program. This is new to Smith Falls. We are going to allow overnight parking in part of the Market Street lot. So it is being launched commencing November 1st. Permits are available for purchase that will permit overnight parking from 6 p.m. to 7 a.m. The price for permit is $50 per month, and anyone interested is to contact Deputy Clerk Bennett at 613-283-4124, extension 1130, or by email at nbennett@smithfalls.ca. Those are my reports.
Thanks, Director Costello. That's really great news to hear about the parking on Market Street and community grants. Is there any questions for Director Costello? I've got one. I'm wondering if the RMEO grant for 2021 has been allocated yet.
I think we're in the final stages. We had a meeting a couple of weeks ago, the staff group, and I think we're in the final stages of having that finalized, Councillor McGuire.
Great, thank you very much. Seeing no further questions, I think we can move on to our next report. Chief Cheeseborough.
Our next report is from the Manager of Economic Development, Julia Crowder.
Oh, you're muted, Julia.
Thanks, sorry. Good evening. I have 2 quick reports as well. They're just related to some local community events that we're hosting. Next week, October 20th and 21st, is the Ontario East Municipal Conference and Receptions. The Ontario East Economic Development Commission has delivered the conference for many years to share municipal knowledge and best practices and to enhance economic opportunities and successes. The conference this year is online. However, there's in-person networking events that have been arranged to help industry stakeholders reconnect in the community. The town is co-hosting one of these regional events in partnership with Valley Heartland. And that reception is Wednesday, October 20th from 4 to 6 p.m. at the community center. Council is invited and staff will send out a registration in the next week, so you can sign up if you're interested in attending. The next one is with regards to a local job fair. We know that businesses are still struggling to find and retain workers, especially in our food and retail sector. So in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce, the DBA, On Track, Work Matters, our Small Business Center, and Valley Heartland again, we're hosting the Smith Falls Fall Job Fair, and that will be on Monday, October 25th from noon to 2 in Centennial Park. We have approximately 10 businesses registered so far, and we're looking to promote to job seekers over the next 2 weeks. And that's it.
Great, thank you very much. Any questions on that one? All right, seeing none, I think we're good to move on to our last director's report for the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that would be an update with regards to our last emergency management control group meeting. Last week when we met, we had currently 19 active cases with 2 in hospital, 2 in ICU, and 1 being ventilated. To date, we've had 1,906 total cases. The death rate remains at 60. This is a fluctuating number that seems to go up and down weekly. And certainly over the long weekend, we haven't been able to receive the numbers for this past weekend. Ontario is closing in on 600,000 cases with 9,800 deaths. We're averaging 442 cases over a 7-day period. In Canada, we're at 1.648 million with 28,000 deaths. On a good note, the health unit was able to provide some exciting information. In Lanark, Leeds, Granville, 96.6% of the population has received their first dose. 91.3% have received their second dose. Most of the spread is being seen coming from close family contact and households. Pharmacies continue to be the main vaccination providers in the communities. The health unit is still continuing to do the pop-up vaccination clinics across the region where needed. There is an expectation that the third dose for vulnerable population will start to roll out in the next few months, including long-term care facilities. It is expected that the province will announce new guidelines related to the holiday gatherings and activities. And staff are nearing the final draft of the Employee Council vaccination policy, which is currently being reviewed by our legal. The final draft will be circulated to staff prior to being presented to council for approval. Vaccination passport screening continues at the community center and has been managed by staff and a third-party security firm since September the 22nd. The majority of the public attending the arena have complied with the operations and they're running smoothly. The CMC is consulting with the province on any potential funding related to the increased costs associated with the security. Under Ontario Regulation 36420, we're required to view the proof of vaccination identification for each person that enters the arena. Presently, we do not have the staff to perform this function, and I've recommended the service be delivered by a third party to avoid any potential conflicts. We are open 108 hours per week and are required to check each person entering the facility every time they enter. Staff have restricted entrance to the facility to one point of entry to minimize the cost of providing this service. The Emergency Control Group has approved the request for a third-party security firm. An RFQ was issued for the security service, and we've engaged the company that submitted the lowest bid to provide the service. An exit clause has been included in the agreement to terminate the service when it is no longer needed or does not suit our purposes. Funding for the security service will be provided from the pandemic relief account for the remainder of 2021. We will be required to provide screening until the provincial regulation is amended or revoked. Organizers are preparing for the community events such as the Santa Claus Parade and Remembrance Day. Should provincial regulations change, organizers will be amending the events to comply with the current provincial regulations. And the last thing is the state of emergency will be maintained until further notice. That is my update for this evening.
Thank you, Chief Cheeseborough. Councillor McKenna's got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. More of a comment than a question. To reach those kind of vaccination rates, I just wanted to acknowledge, and I'm very grateful, there were a lot of people who were hesitant and nervous about getting that vaccine. And it's apparent that they've done their homework and they've been reassured, because those numbers didn't come from the willing. That to reach that 90 plus, people who were very nervous have obviously stepped up, and I'm just grateful to them that that they found the information they needed to make that important decision. I know it was difficult for some people, and I really am grateful that they went ahead and did it.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Great points, and it's great to see the numbers coming up. Any other questions for the chief? All right, so with that, thank you very much for all the director's reports tonight. Next is item 6, letter from Tom and Rita Aris with the topic of the 2022 budget consultation, asking that Marguerite be considered in 22 budget deliberations. Councillor Brennan, you've got a comment?
Yeah, I appreciate that letter, and I'd ask my committee colleagues that maybe we could bring this forward for a committee of the whole discussion in the near future with staff's input. We've read the letter, and I think it's a reasonable request. And I know we visited this a year ago, but it's been over a year, and now the time is nigh. And hopefully we can talk about this in the near future.
I'm seeing a consensus and agreement with Councillor Brennan. Councillor
Thank
Alford,
you for
do you
that.
have a comment?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Brennan. It should bring it back to the committee whole for the discussion, and when the staff is bringing that back, if we could have as much information, I would be interested to know what is currently on the asset management plan and the priorities for that we already have in that. And also if we have traffic count information before and after the school was built, that kind of thing I'd like included in the staff's report.
Thanks, Councillor Alford. Now, this is the context of the letter was to have this discussion with budget deliberations. Just to, for my clarity, are we talking having a separate, this come up as a cow item, or this come up as part of the budget discussion?
Cow.
Separate cow? Is that?
I would suggest cow would be the better, it would be a better start to this. That's my
Seeing nodding heads. Great. So we'll look forward to hearing back from staff on that item. We have no in-camera. Nadine, did you have something to? Okay, sorry. We've got no in-camera issues tonight, so we'll move right into 8.1, Active Transportation Plan with Director Mcmunn, and we've got Kimberly Hunton from WSP. Welcome tonight, Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Okay.
Kim, I'm not sure, Paul here. I just wondered if you wanted me to give you a quick introduction, or are the committee members familiar with yourself? Have you presented?
You certainly, I have not presented before to committee. So if you want to do an introduction, no problem at all. And if you could just confirm if you're seeing the first screen of the presentation.
Yeah, we're seeing it, or I am from my end anyway. So
okay, perfect.
Yeah, so welcome, Kimberly. We have Kimberly Hutton from WSP here this evening. Going to give us a presentation on the active transportation plan that WSP has been working on since, I believe, about July 2021. So they've been working on an active transportation plan and complete streets policy for the town for council's consideration. This initiative is from the strategic plan, aims to set policy that will guide in the development and the enhancement of active transportation networks serving walking and cycling. This will inform policy development to provide the foundation for improved community options for people going to and from work, school, shopping around the community, or simply running errands throughout the community of Smith Falls. The plan will support and encourage healthy living, as well as promote the community and neighboring municipalities through connections from residential walking, cycling, or hiking. Key outcomes from this active transportation plan will inform future policy work and service level changes that will dovetail with the official plan, Parks and Recreation Master Plan, accessibility plan, and the asset management plan. So with that, I'll turn it over to Kimberly to do her presentation this evening.
Great, thanks so much, Paul. So, Mr. Chair, I did want to thank you for having us. As Paul said, I'm Kimberly Hunton, and we have been working on the active transportation plan Vanessa has been helping out, and Paul, now that he is has joined Smiths Falls. So it's been great working with the staff, and everybody's been so helpful in getting us some wonderful information, and we're heading in a really good direction. Really, we're here today to give you an update as to where we are in the process and a bit of a preview as to what we're going to be showing, some of the information that we're going to be showing at the public open house that is happening and scheduled for next Wednesday, the 20th. So, as Paul mentioned, the purpose of the active transportation plan is really to identify a connected network that is on municipal and county roads, and that's accessible to all, really, and is affordable, and we can implement it. And as you come across the projects, we don't run into some problems. We try to identify those initially up front as we're developing the network and the project list. As part of the plan, we include an implementation plan, which looks at short-term, medium-term, and longer-term timeframes. Short-term being 5 years. So we look at what could we do and what can we build, what can we implement within those first 5 years, the next 5 years up to 10, and then beyond 10, it's more of a, as you move forward. The implementation plan includes the budget piece, but it also includes supporting policy recommendations, as Paul mentioned, for development as the official plan gets updated and as bylaws get updated and reviewed through the municipal processes, as well as programming initiatives. So there's the policy piece and programming initiatives, which we'll talk a little bit about in a minute, but they are more geared towards areas of supporting the infrastructure. So not just the infrastructure itself, but also programs that the businesses and residents and interest groups can get involved and really help promote active transportation in the community. And so the plan itself, it's a long-term planning document. It is a living document. It's really meant to be a blueprint kind of idea for staff and council, that they have the vision. It provides the input for grant applications and to get funding. And it shows how the plan, so that we're not developing random little pieces of network throughout the town, that it's done in a cohesive kind of way. So the goals itself, and I'm not going to read these. They're kind of grouped into different sort of themes. One is really about communication with the community and key engagement opportunities. So we did carry out a survey, a public survey. We met with the Accessibility Advisory Committee and the Transportation Advisory Committee. We're having the public open house, as I mentioned, next week, and there is this and another presentation to yourselves. To set the vision and the goals, really, we need to know what the community thinks and what will work for the community, and understand from their perspective what's important, what's less important, and those sides of things. And so while we have the technical knowledge about what kind of facility might be safe or what kind of facility would be possible to be implemented somewhere, we really need the context from the local side. And so that engagement and having a collaborative effort with the council, with staff, the stakeholders, and with the community is really important in establishing a plan that will work for the community once we leave, and you guys have to implement it. The next thing is really about developing the network itself. So it's a connected network. We want to make sure, like I said, that we can implement it, that it's affordable at some point. I mean, we can't build everything all at once, but we need to set a plan to have it incrementally built that makes sense and is in a logical way, and that it's practical and safe and accessible for the community itself. And then as part of that, we have the supporting policy and planning initiatives and programs that work together to help make it a reality. So, there's the one piece of if you build it, they will come kind of side of things. But if we don't tell people about it, if we don't tell people how to get there, if we don't educate people on how to use it, it may not be as successful. So we want to make sure we have that supporting policy and the supporting programs and bring in partnerships with members in the community and businesses so that we can achieve that overall, a bigger vision for active transportation than just simply the facilities themselves. So an overview of the process. So step one was really taking a look at what's out there today. We collected a whole bunch of information from staff about traffic counts and speeds and where existing facilities are, where existing conflict areas are, things like that. We took this inventory, we put it all on a map. We did a public survey, an online survey, which we'll talk about the results in a moment, but in that we asked people to give it's really to collect information from the context side of where they see the issues being, what is important to them, what kind of priorities they have, and then that helps us identify where the network gaps are for cycling and for walking, sidewalk links. And then the Transportation Advisory Committee and Accessibility Advisory Committee meetings, we gained their perspectives and key areas that are important to them, integrate those into the overall route plan for the network. As part of step 2, we also developed the complete streets policy that's currently with staff under review. So we'll get comments back and put those pieces into place, finalize that. And then the identifying route selection criteria is how we decide on how the network is going to be built. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Step 3 is the network implementation plan. So we develop a project list, prioritize based on a high, medium, low of which level we think it would fall into. We're here today to kind of, that's out where we're at, take that information to the public open house, get their comments on it, see what they think about what we're proposing in way of facility types or priorities, and then make those revisions to the overall plan. That gets turned into cost estimates as part of step 4, preparing the overall plan, the maps that go with it, the strategic initiative components and policy pieces. That all goes into the report, which will then be brought forward to you as in a presentation of the complete project. So the public survey, a little bit about what we heard. Really, so we had a really good response. We had 244 people that responded to the survey. We advertised through a few different mechanisms. Speaks Up Smith Falls, we had a site on the website. We did some social media blasting as well as on the newspaper. So Smith Falls staff made all of that happen through their communications group, which was fantastic. And their efforts ended up in 244 people responding to the survey. 70% of, so we asked people how they identify as an active transportation user. Do they walk, do they bike? 70% said that they're a walker, and 20% identified as a cyclist, which is pretty low. I think we could do a little bit better than that. And then basically when it came down to it, it kind of coincides where it's that people, 37% felt comfortable walking in the town on the existing roads and sidewalk infrastructure, which I was a little bit surprised by, I'm not gonna lie, because you have a really good sidewalk network already existing. So there's a lot of facilities as the starting point already. So there's those key gaps that obviously people are really missing. And 10% felt comfortable on their cycling, on the cycling side. And when we asked people where they feel the most comfortable cycling, over 40% basically essentially said that they would rather be in their own dedicated facility off the road and in that sort of totally designated space. Purpose for active transportation, you can see here 65%, they're doing it for health and fitness. Recreation, some people think, 42% think that I can get out there and walk or bike to do my errands. 11% for the going to and from work. I think we can do a lot better than that. That's really one of those numbers to key employment areas that Smith Falls. It's a fantastic community for cycling in the size of it and how it's laid out in the sense of distances. They're ideal distances for getting people out on a bike that they're comfortable with distances. So we just need to make sure that people know that it's an option. And tourism, not really surprised by, because obviously it was a survey that was primarily carried out by residents. And so while COVID has us all a little bit as tourists in our own communities, 10% is not really a surprise when it comes to residents responding on that side of it. So the barriers of why people aren't using active transportation right now, it can be grouped really like the conditions we saw, with walking, 34%, it was the conditions of the sidewalks or the trails, 28% they're not cycling because they don't feel safe on existing facilities, and then 25% for the walking, the lack of sidewalks or trails. So it's really related to that infrastructure network component of it. Some we don't have a lot of control over, 27% saying weather for walking, non-ideal conditions, 20% it's not convenient for cycling. not a huge, we might be able to convince some of them that it's convenient for cycling, but not a lot we can do about these things short of a little bit of education on, you know, attire and things like that. And then top reason for why people aren't cycling, 36% don't own a bike. So pretty good reason why not to bike. You don't own a bike. So this leads to that sort of programming side of it and areas where we could potentially improve some of the programming through like bike share programs and things like that, and make those available so that if you don't own a bike, maybe you do grab a bike and go to do one of your errands or something like that, visit a friend. The other thing that we asked people for were kind of we asked for their top 3 locations where they think there's a gap or a problem or a risk or they don't feel safe, kind of those key top, give us your top 3 locations you want to see something happen. Old Slice Road, the bridge crossings, I don't think that's any surprise to anybody. In the parks, the Lower Reach Park and the waterfronts, the pathways in there, and Cataraqui Trail, the connections. The commercial areas, Lombard Street came up, and then the schools connecting into the schools. And then finally, just on the reporting side for the survey, the target action. So we asked people, you know, if you were going to be, if it was your money and you were investing, and you got to choose where we were investing, where would you do it? Number 1 was improving maintenance on existing pedestrian and cycling facilities. 2 was building more. And then 3 was focusing more on the pinpoints of the crossings themselves or signal timing and that side of things. So for the network development, I just wanted to give a bit of an overview on how we do it. So really the first thing is existing conditions. We talked about that. We identify the existing facilities, we identify key destinations and what kind of key destinations we look at, things like schools, parks, the commercial area, just how people identify them within the community. We identify previously proposed routes from planning documents and the strategic plan and any kind of projects that you have going on, as well as road rehabilitations that you have as part of your plans, because those are great to piggyback on for when you're doing and adding the cycling facilities. Gaps and candidate routes. So we identify what the route selection criteria is, how we're going to establish where our routes are going to be, identify the gaps and what where the opportunities are for the facilities. We have here for new cycling routes, but we also look at the gaps for the sidewalk side. Field investigation, we do a desktop review, we take a look in the field, we see if there's an existing facility that can still be considered an existing facility, or is it something that requires a bit of upgrades, and what the proposed routes are. Maybe there's something, if there's like a large row of really old trees, we want to look at a parallel route because we're not going to go in and take out a bunch of old trees kind of thing for adding if we needed to do something like that. And then we confirm the network and select facilities. So confirming the routes, and that's really through that, that review of, can something actually be done on this roadway? Do we need to take out something? Are the houses going to be impacted? Those types of things, and identify what the projects are. We use the Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18 to identify what sort of facility type it is, and it's based on volumes and speeds. So the network development process, this kind of continues, and it speaks to the how we come up with the network. So you're seeing here the yellow, goldish yellow lines are the cycling routes that are proposed. And the way that these were established were really through direct connections throughout the town, having those direct connections, linking in our key destinations and our key points of interest that people have in the community. So the big employment nodes, that sort of thing. Connection to the surrounding area. So with the county, the Lanark County and United Counties of Leeds and Grenville, like where they're putting facilities and how we're bringing people in, doesn't stop at the boundary. We need to make sure that we are able to cross the boundary. Having the trail side of things and proposed routes and trails. So there's a number of trails that all kind of end and with Smiths Falls, or start in Smiths Falls and connect in Smiths Falls. There's a lot of key connections and those kinds of things. So we want to make sure that we're taking into account the use of those, but also connecting to those trails and those facilities within the town. And then there's a lot of work that's already been done as far as identifying some of the cycling routes or comfortable routes that people are using by organizations, interest groups, and businesses. And so we take a look at those because they've already established some of those of where people are comfortable riding. And based on that experience or lessons learned, we look at that as well. Project prioritization. So this is the piece where we look at that high, medium, low. Everything gets an initial rating. So it doesn't mean, so within the implementation plan, the highs would be the starting point for which projects can we build first. And then depending on where that line kind of falls of our budget, we might end up with some of the mediums, we might not. But because it's a living document, it depends on if there's any kind of budget. New budget becomes available, grants become available, we can always like shift the years to build more, or if there's something that comes up where money has to be shifted to something like, say, COVID, we can always shift it back and do things like the following year. A project might end up getting delayed to the following year. So for the high points, we really looked at defining high priority projects as ones that were in the strategic plan. High reliability on the survey results of where people saw. We saw sort of some of these key locations really popping out. What the advisory committees had as in the way of input and connections to the multiple destinations. So if it connected to a school and a park and a commercial area, it was rated higher than, say, it just connected to a park, for example. Medium, we looked at the connection between the high priority routes. So once we had established the high priority routes, some of these lesser traveled routes would end up being a medium to connect the two together. And then also frequently traveled routes using Strava. So the map that you see here on the screen is a screenshot from Strava. Strava is an app where people can, they enter themselves, they create an account. And if you're walking or biking, you say that you're walking or biking, it tracks your route GPS. It then puts all of the information together. So the very bright white lines are your key routes that people are cycling on. The red lines are ones that people aren't on quite as much. And people tend to use it like they might end up competing with some of their friends and that kind of thing, but it's a really good tool to see where people are biking right now to help with defining where some of the priorities are. The low priorities come down to ones that have fewer connections to key destinations, the lower volume roadways people might already be comfortable biking on, for example, and if it's difficult to implement the projects with less benefit, if there's not very many people, like, you know, one of these redder kind of routes and it's going to be a hard one to implement, then maybe we put it off and we do some of the ones that are going to have a higher benefit first. So just before we step into the next slide, sort of summarizes what we are looking at. Just a brief description. There's a few different facility types. Like I said, we define facility types based on the Ontario Traffic Manual Book 18, which is for cycling projects. The shared space is basically within the curbs, bikes and cars travel together, tend to be lower speed, lower volume roadways. Paved shoulders versus buffered paved shoulders. So we've all seen a paved shoulder. To be a cycling facility on a paved shoulder, you want it to be in relatively good condition, but you also want it to be 1.5 meters wide, 1.2 and a pinch point, but ideally 1.5 meters wide. A buffered paved shoulder is for when there's a little bit higher volume on the roadway, or if people tend to travel a little bit faster than say the posted speed, or we know there's a speeding problem, something like that. There's a buffer space, and that width is based on, again, our volumes and speed. So it can be as small as 0.3 meters and as big as, say, a meter, depending. That's where that comes from. A multi-use pathway is the completely separate, outside the road, the curb, two directions, bikes, hikers, runners, walkers, strollers, everybody's on that multi-use pathway. Skateboards, longboards, they're all in that one shared space, but it's outside the roadway. From a bike lane perspective, and I realize we didn't put a picture of a sidewalk here, so I'll just say sidewalks, but I think we all know what a sidewalk is when I define sidewalk. But bike lane, obviously you've seen all the, a painted bike lane where there's no real gap, but it does provide a space, a designated space for the cyclist. A buffered bike lane is exactly the same thing. It's just the same as a buffered paved shoulder where we have a space, and the space varies between 0.3 and again, it can be up to a meter, but we tend to use about half a meter if there's parked cars. So a buffered bike lane we often use if we're going to have parking beside it. And that's to have that dooring area so that if a door swings open, the cyclist doesn't hit the door. And so that tends to be about 0.5 meters as a minimum, 0.3 if there's no parking, and can be a bit bigger. So just to give the space, depends again on the road operations and the speed. And then cycle track, y'all know what cycle tracks are. This is your own cycle track, so dedicated facility for cycling only. Pedestrians aren't in that space, but it's off the roadway. But it's not different from a multi-use path in that they're not, it's not a shared space with other active modes. So there was that map that we showed of the network itself. When we looked at the facility types, and we do have a number of maps that if anybody is interested, we can share, but it's going to be at the open house. So that material will be at the open house where we're going to have the facility types, the priorities on each of the individual projects. But just to give you a bit of an overview of what kind of lengths we're talking about for development. Cycle track, so these lengths are, you know, they're very exact right now, down to centimeters here and stuff, but it's really to give you an idea and a sense. They are going to change. We're going to get comments at the open house. We're going to get comments from the, we've gotten comments already from staff. We've got some of those numbers in here that we were able to incorporate from earlier last week. And so these numbers are subject to change, but they give you a good idea that they're not going to change too much. They give you a good sense of what we're looking at. So just under a kilometer of cycle track, 5 kilometers of buffered bike lane, 5 kilometers of bike lanes, buffered paved shoulder, just a little bit. There's an area that's a little bit busier and a little faster. 1 kilometer paved shoulder, it goes to show how urban the area is within town. Shared space, little under 8 kilometers of shared space. So like I said, those are your lower volume, lower speed roadways. And there's things that we can do on those roadways to really help emphasize and show people that they are in a shared space. Multi-use pathway, 2 kilometers, and then just under 4 kilometers worth of sidewalk links are what we currently have in the way of projects. So the next piece is the policy. Sorry about that. So from a policy side, this is really part of the next stage as we get into the implementation plan, but obviously we've already started thinking a little bit about what some of those policy initiatives are that would work. Age-friendly communities, these are some of the possible recommendations that'll come out within the plan, but age-friendly communities and equity. So pedestrian facilities with hardened surfaces, crosswalks and sidewalks. So we need to make sure that we're complying with the Accessibility for Ontarians and Disabilities Act. But this is where we might look at some upgrades to existing trails like the waterfront trail or something like that for the surface type or the width. And then official plan update, something that might be recommended is during your official plan update, we might want to look at developing a map of equity areas if there's certain areas of town where people might not have as much access to a vehicle and they might do better with some active transportation. It could help with setting some of the priorities or some of the moving forward, some of those priorities and some of the projects and how they get implemented. New developments is another area. There's 2 pieces really with new developments. There's the one where it's the actual site plan review and the site plan approval, where they need to, part of the policy recommendation would be that they consider the active transportation plan, and if there's a sidewalk link proposed in front of their building site, they would build the sidewalk piece or upgrade the sidewalk piece or make sure that they're not doing anything that's not connecting, leaving a funny little gap to the overall network. The other part is the site plan development orientation, and so how we want to develop what the site looks like, so that if we're developing a business, we don't have a busy road or parking access in front of the building that people now have to cross in front of. or how the building is orientated on the site might mean that you are helping people get there in an active way, connecting and making sure that it's orientated, that the front of the building is, you know, on the nice trail front or something like that, and the vehicles kind of go around the back, things like that. Updating zoning bylaw to include minimum bike parking. So there's an update to the zoning bylaw happening right now. There are minimum parking requirements in the zoning bylaw currently. That's for vehicles, for different land uses, but perhaps we add in what minimum bike parking is for certain land uses when you're building a school or an apartment building or whatever. There's also a minimum number of bike parking spaces you also need to include in your development side of things. Updating existing bylaws for permitted sidewalk cycling. So under the Highway Traffic Act, bikes are a vehicle. As we build a network, we might not have it all in place right away. So in the meantime, we make an exemption where kids a certain age, pick a number, and under can ride on the sidewalk so that it's more comfortable for them, their parents, and it gets them still like going on the active transportation as we build out our network. Eventually they can move into the comfortable cycling piece. And then maintenance policies related to surface treatments or winter maintenance. This is again, how often maybe it gets cleared. We have the minimum maintenance standards, but is there certain ones or certain areas of the city that should have a bit of a higher standard? And then outreach, these are the programming sides. These are really partnerships that are formed with the community itself. And again, these are things that are part of the next step. At the open house, we'll have a list of ones so that people can comment and say which ones they think would be the most relevant or the most successful within Smith Falls. But ideas would be developing a comprehensive wayfinding strategy and signage plan. So this is not just your green, this is a bike route kind of sign. It gives you more information, like how long it's going to take you to get downtown. People need to feel comfortable with how long it's going to take them and make sure that they're not going to get lost. Sometimes people don't bike or walk because they think they're going to get lost and they're going to have to walk an extra 4 kilometers. So the signage helps them and says, you know, you're going to be at the waterfront in 6 minutes if you walk, 2 minutes if you bike, or if you do the waterfront trail 3 times around, you're going to lose, you know, you're going to burn X number of calories. It gives people information that they're interacting with the facilities themselves. Community-based bike sharing program. This is really on that side where 36% didn't own a bike. So areas where we can improve, and maybe not everybody's going to run out and buy a bike, but if we have a bike sharing program, people can either borrow a bike or sometimes partnerships, people donate their bikes and then, you know, other ones, bike shops fix them up and then give them out to people that might need them. So there's ways of doing that can help get more bikes out into the community if that's what the limitation is. Developing the website and the app, people visiting. This is, again, is one of those partnerships where the businesses might advertise on a map, print it, it's available at their business. And that side of things, but it also shows people visiting the community or people living in the community where to go, again, about that confidence and knowing where you're going. Family Bike Days is about 2 things. One, it's about getting people excited and seeing how you can do things and doing stuff like organized rides and understanding what's happening in the network, but also things like on education, telling people that they need a bike bell, maybe handing one out. Bike rodeo, teaching people about how to keep their 1 meter spacing, how to do their hand signals and all those kinds of things, just refresher sides of things. And a lot of those are, again, done in conjunction with some of the schools or police and emergency services. Bike parking, so that you don't end up with mishmash of parking all around town. To have one sort of standard look to it. The town can create sort of that look and then partner with the local businesses they give the space. So this is something, an idea. And then monitoring, making sure that we are reporting out, you know, what the improvements are. These are just a handful of them. There's a number of other ones we're probably going to be developing. Like I said, the open house will have a list of them, and they will, to get an idea and a sense from people about what they are thinking would be most successful for them. Next steps, and I appreciate your listening to me. I know I'm longer than my 10. I did tell Nadine I was going to be longer than my 10 minutes, but hopefully we're doing still okay. The public open house is October 20th. It is at 7 o'clock. It's virtual. The link has been advertised through a number of things. The communications folks, again, at the town have been great. They've been pushing it out through social media. The Speaks Up Smiths Falls website, newspaper ads. We also have emailed it out to all of our stakeholders, and all of I think we had over 100 people that left their email with us through the survey. So we've emailed out a direct invitation to them. Following the open house, we refine the project list and the prioritization with the input that we receive, make sure that the community feels the same way of how we've gone through and taken their information that they've given us so far and put it together, making sure that they agree with how we've done it, and make those changes to where we've not. Develop the implementation plan. So that includes the policy updates, and the development side. That'll include the finalization of the complete streets policy and also the programming initiatives. The plan itself gets developed, and then we'll be back to see you close to the end of November, the November 22nd meeting, to give you the overall finished product. So thank you, Chair. I'd happily take any questions if anybody has through you. But that is the end of what I have.
Thanks a lot. That's great. First up, we've got Councillor Allen.
Thank you very much, Kim. This is an excellent document. I was so pleased to get it, and I read it and reread it. I've been involved with a number of meetings over the last probably 10 years or so in our community dealing with some aspects of this. You've put this together now in such a complete way, and all the important steps are there. So I look very much forward to being at the public open house, being part of that and hearing what people have to say. I love that it is inclusive of accessibility, especially for seniors. There's so many people say to me that is one of the things they are most impressed with in our downtown now. There was a lot of fear of, parking and moving about, but I'm hearing from a lot of our seniors that they find it easier. And so those things are really important too in a community. So thank you for your work. And I look forward to the last two parts, the open house and the final report. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Any other hands? Councillor McKenna, then Mayor Penko.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if we could do we need the screen up? It's just, I like seeing everyone, but that's
Sure.
up to you guys. Thank you
the
very
two
much.
Screens. There we go.
Thank you very much, Kim, for that presentation. I was thinking about, it reminded me, your presentation, and I'm not sure which box it would fit in, facility, policy, or outreach. But I know in the cities, for example, Ottawa will close a large section on Sundays just for cycling and walking. Where would that type of, is that a policy change? Is it a facility, or is it an outreach? And I didn't see any reference to that sort of intermittent active transportation option.
Right. Mr. Chair, if I can through you, essentially that would be part of the programming initiative. So that would be some of the strategic initiative that really help sort of the idea of the family bike days. It's the Sunday rides, and a lot of the times you'll see, like, you referenced the ones in Ottawa along the parkways and things like that, and you'll see the bike repair stations where people can stop and learn how to change a flat tire, or learn how to check their brakes and things are working and stuff like that. So a lot of those are that supporting programming side, and we get a lot of that is developed through the local businesses and local interest groups and the cycling advocate groups and stuff like that, because they're often the ones that are volunteering to fix the flat tires and those kinds of things and teach the programs. And then they also are often sponsored by, for example, like the Canopy Growth Corporation could sponsor one of the rides or something like that. The closure and what streets it is dependent, obviously, on council and as it gets going. Like, it wouldn't recommend which street in the plan itself, but that as a programming initiative would be included.
Thank you. If I may, Mr. Chair, so it is part of the consideration of your work. It's an option.
Very much so.
On the menu.
Very
you.
much so, as part of the programming, yes.
Thanks, Councillor McKenna. Mayor Penko.
Yeah, thanks, Kim, and very, very insightful, very informative. And I guess when we consider we're a community of less than 10 square kilometers,
Mhm.
and the ability for people to get around in an active way, and all the merits of active transportation, from of course health to environmental and societal. It's I look at this as being a foundational document which will guide future councils in its decision making when it comes to when we do work, how we're going to do it. And a couple of I guess surprising factors: the condition of sidewalks being probably the biggest reason why people don't walk more. So I think it's important. I know we have staff who do a condition assessment of all our sidewalks, and I guess we know where work is needed. We try and prioritize that work as we're doing additional street work. But it's important, I guess, for us to understand that might be one of the biggest barriers, and how we can enable that. And then the whole lack of bike ownership. And I suppose it's not surprising that a lot of people don't own a bike. And I suspect it's probably not 64% of our population that own a bike, but of the respondents, 36% said they don't. And many don't feel safe on existing facilities. So I think obviously the objective here is, if we can create the environment that is safe and accommodating for people, then the outcome will be much more active transportation. So very encouraging. I look forward to the final report in November.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Penko. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, and thank you, Kim. Great report. I'd note, and I'll agree with the mayor. I mean, your survey was, it was well 244 or whatever is pretty good, and 70% of the people identified as pedestrian, and 20 is cyclists. I know we'd like to see that higher. However, when I went down to the proposed projects, there are a lot of barriers for pedestrians as well. So I look forward to the public meeting and listening to more comments from the citizens. But as a walker, I know that there's barriers, and you know, we are in a climate where winter is a challenge for cyclists as well. And so anyway, it's interesting, and it's a great report. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. Thank you, Kim, for coming and giving the presentation. I was really excited to see the results in the study, because I don't think we've ever taken a really deep dive into user responses around cycling infrastructure. I know we've done a ton of research in the past on pedestrian friendly infrastructure and understanding pedestrian movements within town. And like Councillor Brennan said, there are lots and lots of walkers, many of whom sit around this table. So we know that our infrastructure on the pedestrian side is not in its best shape. And quite frankly, the idea of adding additional infrastructure for cyclists is where I'm struggling, because I look at the response rates about people who make use of cycling infrastructure in town. And granted, there is no cycling infrastructure beyond Beckwith Street, let's be honest. But I feel like we're in that proverbial chicken or egg situation. You know, do you build infrastructure hoping that the residents will take to cycling and it will become easier for people to cycle? It's a bit of a guessing game. And I struggle with that for the very reason that our pedestrian infrastructure on its own is less than par. And quite frankly, I wonder if that shouldn't be the priority right now. So I do look from the public in the coming weeks through public consultation about whether or not they really feel that the municipalities should be setting aside reserve funds to make sure that we're building cycling infrastructure, rather than prioritizing our existing service levels and improving what we already have. But I think the results that you presented in the study were insightful, and hopefully we can use them to make an informed decision in asset management planning as we go forward. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor Alfred, did you have any comments? Or okay, so I'll ring in with mine. Yeah, this has been really great, Kim. I really appreciated your visit to the Accessibility Committee. The interactive presentation we got there was really well received by the group. And it brought up a lot of really interesting ideas that never crossed my mind. For example, the white trails in Lower Ridge Park are very difficult for anybody that's using a chair or a walker or any kind of mobility device. Another example was the curb in Centennial Park or Murphy Park, where you can't actually access the bridge that we just put in or the sidewalk to Abbott Street. So really excited to see all this coming together in a holistic way. Also, it's amazing to see that our new intersection at Elmsley and Beckwith is a key node in your draft map there, which is really exciting. So, and I think that shows that this isn't a zero-sum game. Like, sure, we can make this about sidewalks or make this about cyclists, but I think that intersection and the whole Beckwith Phase 2 development shows us that this is a yes and. Like, this is a how do we make a complete street that's great for everybody. And I'd really like to see the emphasis on that instead of on these either or kind of sides of it. The statistic that sticks with me tonight, and I think is going to stick with me all week, is that 64% of the people in town own a bike, which is very close to the 70% that consider themselves pedestrians. 64% of residents own a bike, but only 10% feel safe or comfortable using that bike in our town. How are people supposed to be comfortable staying active, staying healthy if we don't provide the services for them to do so? So I think there's huge opportunities here. Last point is if the 0.9 kilometers of separated cycle track is for Beckwith Street, I'm wondering maybe we can take that out for the public consultation next week, since that's been tendered, it's coming down the pipes, it's going to be built. Just to kind of keep it, it's not going to be part of a future plan. It's already going to be part of our existing inventory. So those are my comments. Thank you very much, Kim. Did you have anything else?
Thanks. Just, and Chair, just through yourself, in answer to your last question, it does not, the 0.9 does not include Beckwith. Anything that was planned or already in schedule to be built is considered existing facility. And so anything that we're showing as the proposed is over and on top of anything you've already decided you're doing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Great. Director Mcmunn, any last comments?
No, I just, through the chair, just like to thank Kim for her time this evening, and look forward to November, as does the rest of the committee members.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming tonight, Kim, and we look forward to seeing you and your team on October 20th at the Memorial Arena.
Yeah, it would be good.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
so
you.
With that, we will move to 8.2, request to lift moratorium on a minor variance application. We have Mr. Grenke with us tonight. Director Costello.
Thank you. Actually, Senior Planner Grenke is on vacation this week, so I am going to do my best to deliver a planning report to you. May need to rely on Councillor Dwyer to fill in some gaps if I don't get it correct. So looking this evening for Council to pass a resolution under Section 45 of the Planning Act to allow for a submission of a minor variance application pertaining to 224 to 238 Percy Street. Which is a site-specific zoning amendment, which was granted in the last 2 years. As Council will remember, this is the Keith Kerfoot development on Percy Street. A Planning Act moratorium on minor variance applications was put into place in 2016, which indicated that for 2 years following the approval of a site-specific zoning amendment, that the minor variance applications would have to come to Council for a resolution. So as Council can remember, in April of 2021, Council did pass a zoning bylaw for this property. It is now a new residential type 5 special exemption 8 holding zone, 16 planned unit townhouses across the 2 lots. The required exception allowed for some reduced yard requirements, including an interior side yard of 3 meters, which means that there would be 6 meters of separation between the middle 2 buildings with a shared lot line in the middle. On September 20th, the Council adopted the site plan agreement and lifted the holding zone for this property. When the building staff was reviewing the application, they identified that the proposed separation less than 3 meters between the two blockhouses on each lot would have necessitated enhanced fire separation requirements. The site plan is buildable by code. However, the developer chose to adjust the placement of the buildings to increase the separation between the closest pair of buildings. For this to go forward, council needs to specifically authorize the submission of the application before it can be filed. So if council has any questions, I will do my best to answer them, but looking for council to approve this so that it can go forward to PAC for minor variance.
Thanks, Director Costello. We have Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I'm you did well, Carrie. And the report, Mr. Granke's report was thorough as well. So no, I'm going to support staff's recommendation on this to allow the minor variance. For the Kerfoot development, I know, and in this case, that each of these types should be considered on a case-by-case basis, and I think that is because, as Mr. Granke says in his report, it doesn't happen all that often. But in this particular case, I think the builder has chosen to make it 3 meters as opposed to 1.8, which, again, it's a side yard. It diminishes the side yard, but I do think that in this particular case, we should move forward with it. And I look forward to the review at the Planning Advisory Committee. Both Councillor Brennan and I will be there.
Thanks, Councillor Alford. We have Councillor Brennan, then Councillor Dwyer.
Yeah, ditto. Yeah, I look forward to this coming forward to planning, and it's been there before, and I can't wait for them to build. So I agree.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. Carrie, can you just comment on confirmation of whether or not we approved the site plan on this already? My recollection was that we did approve the site plan a couple weeks ago.
September 20th, Councillor Dwyer, council adopted bylaws authorizing execution of the site plan agreement and lifted zone.
Okay, thanks. On that note, though, do we need to amend the resolution wording to extend any other sort of approval on the set of plans approved through site plan, or is there delegated authority for that?
I don't believe they have to amend the resolution. From what I've been told, I think it. I've never passed one of these before, but I don't believe so. Okay.
Oh, I only ask because I'd hate to have this fellow wait and come back with another resolution. So if for, safety's sake, we amend the wording to say, we approve it concurrently with amendments to the site plan approval, then I'd rather do that.
Noted. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. I'm seeing thumbs up from everybody else. So I think with that, we can, everybody consents to the recommendation, and we can move on to 8.3, also with Director Costello, request for an amendment to Property Standards Bylaw Report 2021-141.
Thank you. As council can remember, we had a correspondence item on one of our last committee of the whole agendas from the residents of 8 St. Lawrence Street, the Sinclairs, who are requesting council to look at the property standards bylaw to amend the definition of waste to better align with the tree canopy and natural vegetation policy. So in my report, I outlined some background on the property that Ms. Sinclair has given us, and her letter is attached, which also includes many links for other resources from other communities. And as well, I did circulate in my report correspondence from a couple of the other neighbors. I will mention to council, since this report has been published, I've received 3 letters, 2 via email, and one was, I believe, dropped off at the town hall, who are supportive of the property at 8 St. Lawrence Street as the way it stands now. They like the natural vegetation that's occurring there. They find it very educational for children, and they find it aesthetically pleasing. So I've had 3 letters today come in regarding that. Bylaw staff have been out to the property. I've included pictures in the report. as the bylaw, the property standards bylaw reads right now, there is violations regarding landscaping, composter, as well as waste in the yard. So as the property standards bylaw stands right now, staff are recommending that staff proceed with, if council concurs, staff proceed with the normal order of the property standards bylaw, which would be issuing an order, and then they can go through any appeal process outlined in the bylaw. However, I would remind council that we are going through right now a property standards bylaw review, which was one of the recommendations outlined in the Housing Task Force report that council adopted back in 2020, December, I believe. And staff could look at integrating some of these natural vegetation and tree canopy policies within the property standards bylaw, however, still trying to maintain some sort of property standard. It would take some research on our part, but we are going through that process right now of updating the property standards bylaw. It's not recommending right now, as the property standards bylaw reads, that we allow for an exemption to this property. One, because it would set a precedent for other property owners, and two, because it is in violation of the property standards bylaw as it is currently written. So I bring that forward for council's consideration and debate.
Thank you, Director Costello. We have Mayor Panko, Councillor Allen, then Councillor Alford.
Thank you. I struggle a bit with this one because I did go over and do a site visit, had an opportunity to see the property, and a couple of the I think interpretations I would suggest is probably a factor in where we're landing here. There's two composters on site. One is a standard plastic cylinder composter for food waste. The other one is simply yard waste. That is in a more of an open chicken wire protected composter. And so there's nothing in there that's going to attract vermin. It's simply yard waste, which is composted on site rather than taken out to, let's say, our compost site on Highway 43. And I guess when it comes to the logs, which are currently lying on the property on purpose by the property owners, they're not like they were simply discarded there. They're there to provide opportunity for wildlife and some natural decay. And in conversation and in viewing, I think it's the challenge we have here is we've got probably somewhat of a dated bylaw, and as Director Costello mentioned, it's under review right now. And in interpretation today compared to maybe when this bylaw was originally drafted as to what is an appropriate way or inappropriate way to maintain someone's property. And while we may have sort of come to accept and acknowledge that manicured lawns and perfectly kept gardens are what is appropriate and desired by the community, I don't think that's the case, certainly not today. And from an environmental standpoint, with regards to wildlife, with regards to reductions in carbon emissions, when it comes to trying to help capture carbon and capture CO2, I think there's a lot of merit in it over a natural state. And we've had, I know we've had numerous complaints from one neighbor, and I think another concern from another neighbor, and other neighbors who really see the merit and benefit in what's happening here. And in many cases, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And if we looked at this as being a piece of art, some people love it, some people don't love it. And in my situation, I think it's something that we need to be open-minded to the possibilities of altering how we view what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. It's not unkept, it's not ugly, it's not imposing onto municipal property. It's just different than what we come to believe is suitable and appropriate. So I would prefer that we simply, in this situation, reconsider, and there are examples out there, I think Toronto, and there's somewhere else in the correspondence that have encouraged this type of development. And I guess it's not a lack of maintenance, it's all calculated and it's designed in a certain fashion. I think we need to consider beyond what we've considered in the past is what is appropriate. In this situation, I would suggest that we also put a hold on any enforcement action until we make a decision regarding how this council believes lawns should be kept, is the right word, what is suitable, what isn't suitable in, as it relates to yard maintenance, and how open-minded we will be to creating more natural environments that are better for wildlife and pollinators and the environment.
Thanks, Mayor Penko. We've got Councillor Allen, then Councillor Alford, then Brennan, then Dwyer.
Yes, thank you. I agree with the mayor, and I visited the place twice. But yesterday when I was there, Craig showed me around and showed me what, you know, the whole reason that he's doing all of these different things is. And I agree with the mayor in that I think that, you know, we have to be open-minded to people not needing a manicured lawn, especially in the sense that if their family are creating a space where they're learning. And I mean, I know in education right now, there's an active emphasis on natural playgrounds rather than jungle gyms and all the things that we spend thousands of dollars in. And having a natural playground where butterfly garden and stones to jump over and logs to climb and go under and over and all that sort of thing. The very same kind of thing that Craig and Beth are showing in their yard is a good way to grow. That's what children need. And so this family, their daughter, when I chatted with her, has created a number of gardens in that. And she was showing me what she attracts with each one. And as far as I'm concerned, people should be going over to learn from Craig and Beth and their children. And I agree. I think we need to change our bylaws so that they're keeping up with what we know about how children learn and how families develop and use their yards. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. We have Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a difficult one because I feel like we are to some degree in the middle of a neighborhood who is, some are in favor and some are opposed. So I'm a little bit uncomfortable with talking about this particular property. I'll try to go a little bit higher. I do want to say though that I think I applaud the Sinclairs for paying attention to supporting and encouraging the pollinators. We all know that that is an issue and will be increasingly an issue for our world. But in this particular case, I don't disagree with what both the mayor and Councillor Allen have said, but we have a bylaw, a property standards bylaw in place. Is it being reviewed? Yes. Should it be married to the tree canopy policy? Yes, but we are not there right now. And I think we need to be very careful in setting a precedent like this of circumventing what the process is and what this potentially, if we don't have our research done about what we expect or what our community expects in terms of the state of their properties. I would like, before we go against staff's recommendation or before we consider doing that, or making an exception in this case, I would really rather some of the work was done. And in terms of enforcement, well, we are often complained to because our enforcement isn't enough. And now we want to change lanes on this particular issue. So I am going to support staff's recommendation, but as Carrie's outlined and as is outlined in the property standards, that work has to take place here as with the property standards review to incorporate, as both the mayor and Councillor Allen have said, a new way to do it. But what are the rules for that? And until we establish those, I don't think it's fair to this community and others in the community to just say, we're going to just ignore it. So that's my thoughts, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Alford. We've got Councillor Brennan, then Councillor Dwyer.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that. I go by that property probably 3 or 4 times a week. And the first time I went by it, I thought, geez, that's kind of odd. I've been a councillor for with Mayor Panko and Councillor Allen for about 11 years. And I think that you guys probably would agree with me that every time property standards are make the phone ring. And that's not because I'm not talking about the sing players who are trying to do a good thing, but I'm talking about people that just neglect their properties and they look like terrible. Like, I'm not going to use the word, but, and that's where make the phone ring. And then and staff are very, very good. You just pass it along and then they go over and have a look. So we have a bylaw, and the report is very complete, and there's certain things that need to be done to comply with the bylaw. And I'm afraid that if we suddenly amend the bylaw to there's got to be a way to work with the sing players to make it work to conform with the bylaw, and so everyone could do it. But my fear is if you change the bylaw to allow this, people are going to abuse it, and we all will agree that that's going to happen. And so I think that until we can come up with something to enable people to do things a little differently and yet comply with a bylaw that we have in place, I'm going to support staff's recommendation here. I think the report is quite complete. I've communicated with the sing players as well. And I totally empathize. However, there is something in place there, and I'm sure there's a way that we can make this work. And I know staff have been working with them, and I hope we continue to do that. But I'm not supporting changing the property standards bylaw. There's no way.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I kind of share the opinion of Wendy and Jay. I mean, I appreciate what the Sinclairs are trying to do. And as someone who has a property with fairly robust gardens in it, with a lot of pollinator plants, I can appreciate the value that a pollinator garden brings to the community. I can also appreciate the challenges of creating a pollinator garden in a shade garden, because really, I think that's part of the struggle here, is that the lot isn't really well designed for a pollinator garden. And while they are leaving it in a naturalized state, which is commendable and has added benefits to, creating topsoil in a community where we have very little overburden as it exists today, I think that there needs to be more structure around how we permit pollinator gardens to be created. I think if you're going to commit to creating a pollinator garden, power to you, but that is not an inexpensive venture, particularly for a lot like this. And I think it needs to be designed in such a way as to be truly successful as a pollinator garden. So I'm all for the concept, but I think that there needs to be a little bit more municipal policy around designing those spaces in such a way that they're both ecologically friendly and in compliant with the property standards bylaw. Looking at the site, I mean, I think Wendy's right. We have a property standards bylaw. I do not like getting in the habit of making one-off exceptions for property owners. I think it's something that should be applied uniformly across the community. And unless we're going to make sweeping changes to property standards, then this is what we've got, and this is what will be enforced. I I'm a firm believer that the property standards bylaw should be related back to public health and safety. And if there is indeed a public health and safety component that's in violation, then that should be upheld once we do an amendment to the property standards bylaw. But it doesn't sound like that's on the table right now. And so thus this policy is what we have to work with. So I'm in favor of the staff recommendation as presented. And if the town is so inclined to move forward with pollinator gardens, then let's direct staff to put a policy in place to give structure to it, because this pollinator garden looks very, very different than the 2 pollinator gardens that were just constructed on municipal property at Town Hall Square. And they look very, very different than the pollinator gardens that were constructed at Real, or some of the pop-up butterfly gardens that were planted along the Rideau Canal. So I think it merits discussion, but not on a case-specific basis, and not based on this case that we're reviewing tonight.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do thank the Sinclairs for pushing a lot of our thinking forward at this time. I'm looking for a compromise here. We're heading into the snow season next month. I would wonder if staff could find a way to reach out to the Sinclairs to remove some of the most objectionable things that the neighbors have brought forward, the chicken wire composter, and maybe some of the logs. We're going to have snow cover. And that would, if they could find a way to compromise in the short term to bring it up to standard. The snow is going to fall. It gives us and the municipality till the spring to update our bylaws and consider this kind of option in those bylaws. But right now they are not conforming. So I would be, my thought was we reach out, see if they can't get into compliance and buy some time till the spring. It'll be covered with snow, and we update, as everyone wants to see, a more current bylaw. So I am supporting staff's request with those caveats, staff's suggestions. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor McKenna. I'm going to weigh in with my comments, then we'll go to Mayor Panko. I think I really appreciate, thank the Sinclairs for bringing this forward tonight. I think it's a super relevant time to bring it up when we're looking at updating our property standards bylaw. And we get a lot of calls and a lot of complaints, especially in the springtime with property standards issues in town. So I think that it's well overdue to get this bylaw rewritten, and I look forward to it. The thing that comes to me is that there's nothing more, when you think of your municipality, one of the first things that comes to mind is your front door. It's how you present yourself to the community. And I think that's something that we need to talk about as a community before we make changes to. And I think that consultation is really important before we make a decision like this. I think the Sinclairs have done something that a lot of people are afraid to do, and that's come on the public record and put themselves forward. So I'm wondering if in the spirit of Councillor McKenna's compromise, that if we could allow them to maintain what they've got for the time being and publicize that a little bit so people can drive by, they can see what it looks like. And then if we can follow that up with a robust consultation, then we can really make an informed decision in the winter, spring, when we're ready to update our property standards bylaw. Mayor Panko, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, and that really follows my line of thinking to Councillor McKenna's comment. We are mid-October. We're end of the growing season. I mean, the compost heap, I think it's probably a fairly simple fix to enclose that with a wood structure if necessary. And I think when it comes to the other, it's like number 3, the waste, the interpretation of dead, decayed, or damaged trees or other growth and branches and limbs thereof which create an unsafe condition. And I don't think a couple of logs that are in the lawn away from the curb create any unsafe condition for anybody. So I like to have the winter to go through this and to Councillor McKenna's comments, and come back in the spring with a more robust discussion. Staff have the opportunity to research what's happening elsewhere and have a real consideration as to what we believe is most appropriate for our community going forward, without being, I guess, too over aggressive in forcing changes today that may be permissible come next spring, and especially considering we're at the end of the growing season anyway.
Thanks, Mayor Panko. So I'm seeing Councillor Allen is in agreement. So the composter we'd give direction to, but everything else would be left as is until the spring when, no, Councillor McKenna?
No, I was supporting staff's request. I thought if the Sinclairs could bring their property into compliance, then as we head into this, it's a compromise. We head into this winter with they're in compliance, and then we take the 4, 5, 6 months to get this new bylaw in place. And if it changes, then we bring it forward. But I'm not suggesting we ignore this. I'm suggesting they have to meet the bylaw. And there's some things, and if they could do that, I see a real appetite with this council to modernize our bylaws. So I think they're on the right track. They're just ahead of the curve on this. So I think we have to go with the current bylaw, and so I wasn't suggesting we back off.
Good, thanks, Councillor McKenna. So we've got Councillor Brennan, then Councillor Dwyer.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor McKenna, and I'd be very, very, very wary about when if council wants to change a property standards bylaw. I'd be very, very wary about people abusing that change, and that is the last thing I want to see. I want to encourage the Sinclairs. I want them to do, but there's got to be a way to do what they do and not open it up for abuse, because that's probably what's going to happen. But I agree with Councillor McKenna. The bylaw is what it is, and that's what it is.
Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. Yeah, I ditto to Peter and Jay. I mean, I'm not going to get into directing bylaw to stand down on implementation and enforcement of a bylaw. If they have deemed it to be a violation of the municipal policy, and they are prepared to stand up in court and verify that, then I'm not going to stand in their way and direct them down. The policy exists. A violation has been identified. It needs to be complied with. And until that policy changes, that's what we've got. So I will again support the staff recommendation, and I look forward to talking about a pollinator garden specific policy to complement the property standards bylaw as it comes forward.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor Alford.
Yeah, I think I stated my position to begin with. There's some fly after me if I look like I'm waving at y'all right now. I stand too with Councillor Brennan, Councillor McKenna, and Councillor Dwyer. I think all of us want potentially and admire what the Sinclairs are doing, but we're not there. I think somebody said they were ahead of the curve. They are. They're ahead of this curve in our town, but it's not to say that we don't want to see what we can do to support efforts like the Sinclairs have been taking. But in the meantime, we have what we have.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Alford. So I'm seeing a 4-3 split on supporting staff's recommendations, so that will carry. Director Costello, got a question on the property standards bylaw update. Is there a plan for any public consultation as that moves forward?
I would suggest, yes, we do. I can't remember, the last time we updated it was 2014. And I can't remember if there was public consultation at that time. However, it is a bylaw that affects the whole municipality. So I think, some form of public consultation, whether, who knows where we'll be at that point regarding gatherings. But I think I would recommend it because I think our bylaw does need some major upgrades to it. So I think public consultation we should probably put into part of the process. And I would foresee that at the beginning of the process to get some ideas from property owners.
It's great. Thanks, Director Costello. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, back in the day, I don't know how long ago it was, but there was at one time, and I believe there still is, a property standards committee that is comprised of citizens. And I'll direct it to Director Costello. Is that committee still in force? I know.
No,
it's
we do.
Probably
We have a
complete.
property standards committee. They only have meetings when there's an appeal filed. And I don't believe we've had an appeal for many, many years. But the Property Standards Committee, I think this is the perfect opportunity to bring that group together and gather their thoughts on it as well.
I would agree. Is there a council representative on that committee?
There, let me just check with. Nope, there is not. There's no council rep. It's the CBO is our staff resource, and currently there is 3 members of the public, and we have room for 2 more if there's anybody out there who's interested.
Yeah, and I would sit through the chair. I would suggest that maybe one of us can probably sit on that as well, even as an advisory with not a non-voting, but be there.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Councillor Alford.
I think that might be a great suggestion, but I also, what are the terms of reference for that property standards committee? Because if it was just to deal with appeals, then the terms of reference would have to be amended as well.
I can look into all of that.
Councillor Dwyer.
Yeah, I believe it's prescribed under the Ontario Building Code Act, actually.
I believe so as well. I can look into that tomorrow and advise.
Great. All right. Well, I think that wraps up our discussion. So the Sinclairs will have the option to appeal, and maybe we'll get our first property standards committee meeting in many, many years.
Many, many years.
Thank you very much, Director Costello. Next up, we have Deputy Clerk. No, sorry, you're still up.
You're stuck with me for one more report.
You're on a roll tonight. Affordable housing in downtown CIP.
Bringing forward a report this evening asking for pre-budget approval of $50,000. Council has discussed this topic before. We're looking for pre-budget approval so we can start both an affordable housing community improvement plan, which is again one of the recommendations coming out of our housing task force, and as well to update and refresh the current downtown community improvement plan. All the objectives in both CIPs, regardless of whether it's affordable housing or downtown CIP, are outlined in the report. And again, as council knows, the housing initiative is one of the key factors in your strategic priorities for your term of council. So looking for any questions council may have, but at this point looking for 50,000 pre-budget approval, and of course that would be funded through the tax supported capital reserve.
Thanks, Director Costello. Councillor Alford.
Oh, still unmuted. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of questions. I'm not in favor, but I do have a couple of questions with regard to the current CIP and how we see the housing task, or the housing CIP. So is it the intention to press pause on the current CIP until the consultant makes recommendations necessary to formulate the policy for the current and the future housing one? If that's the case, then I don't know how long this consultant's work might take, but I would suggest that we press pause on the current CIP. Don't take any more, i.e. don't take any more applications and work within the $25,000 we left. And once that's gone, there's a pause on that one too. Will we formulate the policy for all both CIPs?
Thanks, Councillor Alford. Director Costello.
That would be a council directive if they wish, to stop intake from the CIP program. The wish would be that one consultant would do both CIPs, affordable housing and downtown. It would just have some symmetry to it, and they hopefully would be able to do them concurrently. But if council, that would be a council decision if they wanted to cease any applications for the downtown CIP that's currently in place.
Councillor Alford.
Well, that is sort of what I'm suggestion, I'm in favor of the housing CIP, but if the same consultant is doing both, so we can gain some efficiencies and some symmetry, then I'm suggesting to my colleagues that we wait until that work is done before we accept any new applications for the downtown CIP.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Alfred. I definitely agree with that. Director Costello, did you have any other? Sorry, no, that's, so we'll go to Mayor Panko and then Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. Yeah, I support the staff recommendation, and I think it's vital we get moving on both of these as soon as possible. There's no merit to waiting until we're through budget and sometime early next year doing this. We'll put ourselves 4 or 5 months behind. And by doing it now, obviously we are that much sooner to having an affordable housing CIP and also our downtown CIP revitalized. To Councillor Alfred's point, I think we made a decision to follow through for the balance of this year, and I assume she's referring to any applications for 2022. And I see merit in what she is suggesting. We don't know what the outcome of this will be and where the opportunities may lie. There could be some changes to the program. So I think we'd want to I don't think we need to make a decision on that part of it tonight. I think once we have an idea of when the consultant is hired, what the timeline will be for completion, and when we would expect that report coming back to council in 2022, then we have probably a better position to make a decision on that. And so that might be Q1 next year, I'm hoping, but I'm certainly open-minded to it, but I support the staff recommendation tonight.
Thanks, Mayor Panko. Councillor Dwyer.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'm a little confused because I feel like we had this conversation like 2 meetings ago. And I thought our consensus was that we were going to see out to the end of the year because it's unlikely that we're going to get a consultant to commission this RFP before the end of the year anyways. I mean, it's the middle, I'm going to go with middle of October. You know, we've got 60 days turnaround for a response to an RFP and probably 30 days to write it. Like we're at the end of the year anyways. So I'm fine with the staff recommendation. I'm fine with seeing out our commitments to the CIP for the remainder of the year. These policies are not groundbreaking by any means, and I don't think that's what we're looking for. I don't think we're looking to be truly innovative with the financial tools that we're offering. I think where our innovation lies is in offering it for the creation of affordable housing, and even at that, there's already templates out there that exist for the creation of affordable housing. So I don't see this as a super laborious process. We're doing a policy update on an existing policy and introducing some more basically a new sub policy to allow for affordable housing. The only caution that I have in combining the initiatives is that one is very, very locational specific, and I would assume that our other one is going to be much more widespread. So I think it is important that we treat these two documents as very separate documents. But I agree that it makes sense to have the single consultant do it, and hopefully we can find somebody to do it.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor McKenna.
I'm supportive of thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm supportive of the staff request to put this early into start working on it right now and take the money out of next year's budget. Councillor Alfred raises a good point. And I understood it to be 2022, suspend it until we get because as Councillor Dwyer points out, we've already decided see out the rest of this year. It might be good if council wants to stop the intake for 2022, that we signal that now so that people don't that we don't end up in January saying it or February and we've got 15 or 20 applications. If we're going to do that, we should just signal that now and wait till the consultant's report comes back. And if we're not going to do it, then it's just business as usual and we keep going. So I'm neutral on it, but I just think if we're going to do that, let the public know now.
Thanks, Councillor McKenna. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, thank you. I actually agree with Councillor Alfred. I think that we should put a pause on the intake and Councilor McKenna is right. We should let them know right away. I foresee some changes here in terms of, in my opinion anyway, the affordable housing and downtown community improvement plans are two things. And I foresee some shifting maybe of resources to one, i.e. affordable housing, and then different priorities for the downtown. So I'd like to have a consultant have a look at that, and in the put the eggs in the consultant's basket, get the report, and then move on in a fashion that is updated and current. So I agree with staff's recommendation with that caveat.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Seeing no other hands up, I'll chime in with my comments. The first is that I support this. I support Councillor Alford's recommendation to stop the intake for new applications. But I think that a big piece is missing for the downtown CIP, because we've talked about Heritage Conservation District and potentially funding a study for a Heritage Conservation District. And if we go forward with that, that's going to have a significant impact on the downtown CIP. So I think this is more of a three-part project instead of just a two-part. And I'd like to see pre-budget approval for the Heritage Conservation District study so it can inform the CIP downtown rehabilitation study. I'm interested to hear what my colleagues think of that, but at the minimum, I support staff's recommendation with ending the CIP intake. Councillor Allen?
I agree with what you just put forward in every way. That's great. It's something that the Municipal Heritage Committee has been looking for and talking about for a number of years. And it would really, really help our situation in terms of getting our Heritage District going. I mean, I think it's been 9 years. It's time.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. We have Councillor Alford and then Councillor McKenna.
Well, you just added another level to this, Councillor McGuire, you and Councillor Allen, but I support staff's recommendation as it stands, but there's nothing to say that staff can't come back with something in addition or linked to this one that we're going to likely okay tonight.
Councillor McKenna?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm working on the staff report we have in front of us and not the Heritage District. I'd need a whole nother discussion and a staff report before I could link it tonight. So I just think it's premature.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor McKenna. I want to clarify, I don't think we should make the decision on the downtown CIP until we've made the decision on the Heritage Conservation District, because they're completely linked. And if we decide we're not going to do the HCD, then great, going ahead with staff's recommendation is fine. But if we do decide we want to do the HCD, we've put the cart before the horse by getting a CIP done without that information to inform it, in my opinion. So Mayor Panko?
Yeah, my comments, I guess, mirror Councillor McKenna's comments. I think I'd like to, with respect, I guess, look after this tonight and then look forward to staff bringing back a discussion on the Heritage Conservation District.
Thanks, Mayor Panko. Councillor Dwyer?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I agree with Mayor Panko and Councillor McKenna on that front. I would love to see a heritage conservation review take place downtown. I've been advocating for it since I did my master's on the subject downtown 12 years ago. Like I would like to see it done, but I think this speaks to the importance of having these types of studies forecasted in our long-term financial plan so that we know what the sequencing of the report writing is going to be. And I know Janet's not here. Carrie, maybe you could just pass the message along and see if she's got some comments about how our master planning work is sequenced in that plan. That'll give us a better idea of kind of what's coming down the pipeline and what needs to be completed first before we undertake something else. And based on that, I mean, if there's a feeling from kind of a larger corporate review that maybe this needs to pause or include the Heritage Conservation District, then we can evaluate that closer to budget time and sequence developments at that point. But I think there's a need to kind of look at a strategy for how we undertake these reviews.
Thanks, Councillor Dwyer. So I'm hearing a consensus to support staff's recommendation tonight, and we will look forward to an upcoming report on heritage conservation districts at a future meeting. Is that any last comments? Great. Well, thank you very much, Director Costello. 3 for 3.
3 for 3. Thank you.
Have a good rest of your evening, and we'll move on to Deputy Clerk Bennett with the method of voting 2022 municipal election report.
Good evening. Tonight I'm here to present the method of voting report 2021-100. I'm here to seek council support to bring forward a bylaw respecting the method of voting for the 2022 municipal election. The Municipal Elections Act details that council may pass a bylaw to authorize the use of voting and vote counting equipment and the use of an alternative voting method by electors. The bylaw is to be passed by May 1st, 2022 to authorize the use of alternate voting methods. So tonight, the report details that the municipal election will be held on October 24th, 2022. And the report details options for the method of voting, including internet telephone voting, vote by mail, or a combination of internet telephone and paper ballot. It also details the advantages and disadvantages of each method. The staff recommendation is the internet telephone voting, which is option 1. I think council will recall from the 2018 election that you're familiar with the process whereby a voter information letter is mailed out to eligible voters providing personal identification number, which will allow voters to vote online or by telephone 24 hours a day for approximately 68 days prior to the election. Similar to vote by mail, the municipal office or another facility can be established as a help center, which will provide a computer, telephone for voting. In addition to the help center, locations can be also established at community halls or the public library. There's also an option for iPads to be available for those that require accommodation for accessibility. And staff will offer or consider offering assistance outside of regular business hours. This is something that we did last year where we opened up on a Saturday for the morning and eligible voters could attend to be added to the voters list. But in addition to that, we could look at maybe providing an area where they could vote. So it's considered a help center, not a voting location. And those amenities are there for their use. Advantages of the recommendation for internet telephone is that it speeds up the calculation of ballots on election night. It reduces the amount of staff and election personnel required to count votes manually and can provide improved accessibilities for voters. The COVID-19 pandemic has also been on our minds when considering different methods. We're optimistic that the pandemic will be over, but it remains an ongoing concern, and we must take those precautions to ensure that all risks for exposure are minimalized. Social attitudes have changed, and residents have learned to adapt to completing transactions online. So the internet telephone voting will provide a safe way of conducting the election. It also provides an accessible avenue for those who are unable to attend a voting place. The rationale by using just internet telephone is that the software provides the electors with an automated report following the election that details demographics, the turnout, and other criteria related to the election. This is something that, unfortunately, at the last election, we weren't able to do because we had internet telephone and we had the paper ballot, so we didn't have all those demographics to combine into one report. The Lanark County clerks will be working collaboratively on process and resources. We've already met to start working on our election manual, and the group intends to use the IntelliVote's system for the internet telephone voting method. By joining with the group, we share resources and we also realize cost savings that may not be achieved independently. So if supported tonight, council would bring forward a bylaw to next week's council meeting to approve the method of voting and to give privileges to the clerk to proceed with purchasing or renting agreements for the voting equipment. And that's basically it at this time. If anyone has any questions, I'll pause.
Thanks, Deputy Clerk Bennett. We've got Councillor Brennan, then Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Nadine. And I'm generally supportive of staff's recommendation. I have questions or i.e. concerns about people that are not able to access or are not comfortable doing it on the phone or don't have internet. And you talked about a help center or possibly maybe help centers where people could go. First of all, would those be available on election day, or would it be on a pre-election day, i.e. early poll?
So staff could look at both, or as noted in the report, the pins available for so many days before the election.
Yeah.
Last election, we did have it on election day, and it worked well. Many members of the public would come in. We had two different lines organized where you could be added to the voters list if needed, and then you'd be provided your pin and you could go ahead and vote. Or if you already had your card, you could come in and use the computer or telephone, whatever worked. Staff were there to kind of assist with the process, certainly not with the voting. They couldn't assist with the voting, but they could assist with the process, as well as we also had procedures for accessibility requirements. So if there was another requirement needed, such as the telephone over the computer or an iPad, we would have that available and ready for everybody to be able to proceed.
Okay, thanks. And also, like through the chair, you called it a help center and not a polling place, but in fact, if someone went to the help center to cast a ballot, as they did last election to cast paper ballots, when they left the help center after they've been assisted, they would have voted.
Yes.
So they have voted then. They just haven't put pencil to paper. The other question I had, if you'll indulge me, the last election, and I got the information from you, thank you very much. 11% of the people who cast ballots last time voted by paper. And we were all there waiting for results on election night, and the delay, if you could confirm, was the actual counting of those ballots, because it's a ranked ballot. There's 6 people running for council, and there were 2 people running for mayor, so you have to count and rank them, and that's why it took so long. Is that right?
Yes, it's a different process. If I had a councillor ask me today, what's the difference? And so with the internet telephone, once the polls are closed, the results are all in, the clerk basically presses a button and all of the reports and everything formulate. Where with the paper ballot, once the polls close, everything's counted. And there's a whole process for that. We have very strict processes. And then we would take the numbers from the paper ballots and we have to add them to the electronic numbers that come through. So it procedurally is a bit more cumbersome than just pressing the button from the internet telephone.
And that was only from 11% of the people voting by paper. So I support your recommendation. I would hope that maybe as we've got a little over a year now, that we really pump the information to people and make sure they're comfortable. It's easier to do. And we know we have a lot of seniors that are like, if I can't go mark an X somewhere, it's not right. But I think that there's a way to communicate that you can come down and we'll show you how to vote and you can vote. But I support this. It's cheaper and it's going to be quicker, and I think it'll be transparent as well. I have confidence in it. So thanks for the report.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Great questions. Just for clarity before we move on, is it 11% of eligible voters or 11% of people who voted used paper last time?
My understanding is it was 11% of eligible voters.
Okay, so that's 20%.
Sorry, I should have missaid that. My understanding is it was 11% of those that voted. So and I confirm that Director Costello is on. She was the returning officer for the last election. But that is our understanding is 11%.
That's correct.
Great,
Yeah.
thank you. So we've got Councillor Alford, then Councillor Dwyer, then Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And while I somewhat mourn the excitement of election day and filing down and seeing all your neighbors to put pencil to paper and say hello to everybody, I very much do support staff's recommendation for many reasons. Some of them that Councillor Brennan touched on. It's cost effective, it's inclusive, it's efficient. And also I think we can't forget that the demographics of our world now and how people operate, particularly those say under 40, this is the way they vote. And so if we want to see more engagement by voters, and I think this is the path that we should be on.
Thanks, Councillor Alford. Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. I'm going to be fast, Mr. Chair, and then I'm going to have to excuse myself because in 5 minutes I have to be in a separate municipality for another council meeting. I am fully endorsing telephone voting and computerized voting. I think it makes sense. I think our clerk's office does a fabulous job at assisting people to make sure that they know what they're doing, whether or not it's with paper or electronically. You know, they take the time to go down to the long-term care homes to make sure that people are comfortable with the methodology that is being used. So I don't believe that we're doing a disservice to anyone within our community by moving away from paper ballots. I can appreciate that there's an amount of skepticism around the legitimacy of online voting, but I'd say that that's just as likely to be true with paper voting, that the margins of error on paper voting are high, that it's time consuming for our staff and stressful, and that this is becoming so tried and true on municipal operations that I don't have any fears with moving to the system in totality. I think if we made the mistake again of doing both systems, we'll find ourselves in the same position again, where we have the disadvantages of both and none of the advantages of having both. You know, so I look forward to receiving election results much quicker than we did last time. It was a very late night. I think we're the last people in Eastern Ontario to get our election results. So I think this is a positive step. And Nadine, I just want to tell you that I appreciate all the information that you put in that report, because it's thorough, and you set aside all of my reservations about running electronic voting. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will say good night to you all, and I will see you next Monday.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. Good luck at your next meeting. We've got Councillor McKenna up next.
Yeah, I'm supportive of staff's recommendation. I did have a question. Deputy Clerk Bennett, you referred to that we would have the demographics of people who voted. That surprised me a little bit. I just thought I would go in and mark electronically my ballot. Do I have to divulge any personal information about myself other than, because I'm going to have a PIN number that confirms I'm a resident, and that should be all I really need. So are we tracking? I would love to know the demographics of who voted, but what are the security features in that personal information being protected?
I see that Director Costello just jumped on, and she held the last election, so I'll let her answer that.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. So the report that the software we use can give us, it can give us different reports at the end of the election. It can give you the percentage of people, for instance, who voted in a certain poll. So for an example, I'll say poll 26, which is the Carroll Crescent, Marcia Drive, Broadview area. It can give you the number of residents that voted in that poll. I don't think it goes right down into an age demographic, but it does give you a bit of basis or a bit of information on how many people voted in certain areas of town. So it gives you information like that. There's no identifying features in the reports. It is very generic in nature, but it does give you a better idea of who voted in what poll, who voted for who, as an example.
So if I may, Mr. Chair, just to follow up, just so if I could, again, I'm not dissuaded by, I want electronic voting. I'm supportive of what you're suggesting, but I would need a little bit, is it demographics or just, I'm not sure what's on that menu of, and I don't need it tonight. I could follow up tomorrow and actually see what reports that this particular product will generate.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, we can certainly do that. We've got the information from the software package we used in 2018, and we can let you all know kind of the reports that would become available upon completion of the election in 2022. Absolutely.
Thanks, Councillor McKenna. I'm also very concerned about personal data being collected, and I'm wondering maybe if we could get a report at a future committee of the whole, just because the public's probably concerned too, and to have that conversation in an open forum gets it out there, and we can see what we're collecting and what we're not collecting and how it's protected. Director Costello.
I think this is a perfect opportunity that was discussed before about getting material out to people ahead of time. In 2018, we also offered public information sessions and a workshop at the arena for anybody who wanted to see how the system worked. So I think little things like that put out on Facebook or put out on our website to show everybody how their information is protected, different ways that, or the ways that they can come into the town hall to vote. I think that's all part of the educational campaign. We should, once we choose the method, that we can go down that trail and do educational campaigns on all of those different items that pop up during an election.
Okay, and depending on the method we choose, I'm assuming there's more than one provider of this service. Do different service providers collect different levels of information or have different levels of anonymity, or how does that work?
I would assume they're all the same. I mean, we've only done it once with the one company, and that's the company that all of the clerks within Lanark County have used. I would assume they would all be relatively the same. There is privacy laws in Ontario. The one we have used before has very strict guidelines for privacy.
Okay, great. I look forward to seeing those updates. My last question is, are you able to register to vote at a help center? Great.
Yes.
So I was definitely a little reluctant to this, but I think the help centers, they'll be essentially polling stations. So that'll be a great service. Councillor Brennan, did you have one last comment?
No, I think it's far enough out. I think the education piece is key, and not only for citizens, but for candidates as well. So I think we'll be well informed as we were last time, thanks to Deputy Clerk Bennett and Clerk Costello. So this is a good time to talk about it.
Great. Thank you, Deputy Clerk Bennett, Director Costello, for being on top of this. And I think you've got your direction. So we will move on to our next item, 8.6, Upper Canada District School Board presentation. Was anybody going to speak to this tonight, or?
So, sorry, Councillor McGuire, this item was to come forward at after the meeting in August. And so it was deferred to a future committee of the whole meeting. It's been bumped a couple times just to the load on each agenda. So basically it was further to a delegation that you received in August from Upper Canada District School Board. There's also a correspondence item from the County of Lanark related to this, where they passed a motion. So just the directive at the time was that council wanted to discuss it further. So we're just seeking if there's any more action that council would like to take at this point in time, or anything that staff need to do.
Okay, great. Does anybody have Lanark County's motion handy?
I can pull it up here.
Sorry, I'm looking for it here.
No worries. Okay, so did you find it, or would you like me to read it?
Maybe if you could read it, Nadine, and then Councillor McKenna's got a comment.
Okay, so this was further to, again, the presentation from the Upper Canada District School Board with respect to permanent remote learning. And so the resolution that was passed by the County of Lanark on June 23rd was that whereas the Council of the Corporation of the County of Lanark have learned of a proposed plan by the Ministry of Education to retain and expand the remote learning options put in place to cope with COVID-19 pandemic throughout Ontario. And whereas the Board of Trustees of the Upper Canada District School Board have reached out to municipalities and their respective elected officials to highlight their concerns related to such proposed plan. And whereas the current online model used by the Upper Canada District School Board was developed to support remote students during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and was never intended to be more than a contingency for program delivery. And whereas both the emergency models of remote learning implement during the pandemic, as well as proposed models highlighted by the media regarding pending legislation in March 2021, do not address concerns about optimal learning environments for students or the way that we can sustain small schools in rural, remote, and northern settings. And whereas there has not been any widespread consultation with school boards, municipalities, students, and parents regarding the proposed changes to make remote learning a permanent option in the provincial education system and potential impacts of such legislative change. And whereas there already exists a fully functional online learning consortium in Ontario, in brackets the Ontario e-learning consortium, for students who require specialized courses not available at their school. And whereas this arrangement for online learning is fully compatible with rural, remote, and northern schools, does not have an impact of student enrollment counts for the operation of small schools, is fully funded and involves local staff in the delivery of the program. And whereas the Upper Canada District School Board and the community at large recognizes the necessity for the existing online learning platform for children, and whereas it is recognized that our future involves increased enhancements to technology, online and remote learning options, now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Corporation of the County of Lanark hereby supports the Upper Canada District School Board in conveying their concerns related to permanent remote learning of student education programs to the province, and that and their resolution denotes that the warden be authorized to send a letter to the Minister of Education expressing council's support for the Upper Canada District School Board, seeking clarification on the proposed legislative changes to education in Ontario, and outlining the County of Lanark's concerns related to such proposal as follows: lack of communication and consultation, the potential adverse effect on the sustainability of small rural schools and municipalities should this feature become a permanent choice for students and families, reduced funding levels over the long term, diminished local influence on education. Sorry, that was quite long.
Deputy Clerk Bennett, I didn't realize it was so long. We've got Councillor McKenna, then Brennan, then Mayor Panko, and then Councillor Alford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayor Panko and I were at the county when the school board presented there, and I asked the same question as I did when they came to Smith Falls Council. I too support, if there's a proposal out there, then there should be public consultation. I didn't have any issue with that. I just hadn't seen any proposed legislation at the time. It was still, I described it, is it a balloon, a trial balloon, which often goes up and they wait for feedback, but I still have not heard any from the throne speech or anything from the government that says they're actually going to do this. But if they are, then they should consult with the public, and that's fine. I agree with it. The concern primarily is, anyways, that the horse is out of the barn on e-learning. This is happening around the world. It's how do you do it in consultation with the public so that the students who get the most benefit from that tool have it, and then that many students need in classroom learning as well. And then the other part of it to do it is, unless they're going to adjust their the numbers of students who go to small rural schools or even small town schools, it could mean the end of, if they don't have enough students, then their funding goes down because they're doing e-learning. So those policies would have to be adjusted as well. So what I'm saying is, if there's draft legislation, absolutely consult the public and the school boards on it. until I know that there is, I don't, and if they do that, I would also suggest that they look at a review of their small schools, the demographics that need to keep them going, because this would impact it. But e-learning is a good tool. It's out there. It's not for everyone.
Thanks, Councillor McKenna. So just for my record, you're suggesting we hold off for now, but keep an eye on the issue?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have enough information. I trust the school board. They're suggesting this is a real threat. I'd like to support them. And so I would also like to see some documentation that where did this come from?
Okay, thanks, Councillor McKenna. We've got Councillor Brennan up next.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Councillor McKenna. I think you mentioned, Nadine, that this was passed in June. June?
Yeah.
So that's like 4 months ago. And it seems to me that this was sort of a knee jerk on COVID. I know the Chief Medical Officer of Health in Ontario has said the schools are going to be the last thing, the last thing to close. And, they in my view, I think the province realizes the value of in-person learning. And there's also, as Councillor McKenna says, there's value in e-learning as well. So I don't have a problem passing a resolution. The county's done so. I think it's a little post haste now. It's been a few months, but I'd be more inclined to of course support public consultations. That's my middle name, but I would keep an eye on the issue and just hold off for now. That would be my preference.
Thanks, Councillor Brennan. Now we've got Mayor Panko, then Councillor Alford, then Councillor Allen.
Yeah, not to repeat what's been said, but I think we all acknowledge that while there's a benefit of virtual learning, it's not suitable for all kids. And of course, the whole school environment brings more benefits than simply the education they're getting from their teachers. I think the school board is ultimately those that are the most responsible for the education, for the education of all our kids, the community's kids. And in this situation, if they've got some concern that there could be a negative impact on the children of our community, I'm going to trust their judgment. And they may know things that we don't know. They want to take a proactive approach here, and I'll support that proactive approach.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Panko. Councillor Alford.
Yeah, notwithstanding the good points that Councillor McKenna made, if this is a trial balloon, then I have no objection to a resolution similar to what the county did. After having gone through COVID with 2 young boys in virtual school, as many of you have experienced, it's on several levels that we need to make sure that our schools stay healthy, not including what services with regard to food security are provided to those children. It's a whole wealth of things that having vibrant schools in our neighborhoods mean. So they already have, as the board points out, there's already an online learning consortium. We know that is something that works for people and should be continued and perhaps enhanced. But in the meantime, I have no objection to doing a resolution much like the county did, because if this is indeed a trial balloon, the more people they hear from, the better.
Thanks, Councillor Alford. Councillor Allen.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And unlike my colleagues that don't think we need to do our own, I would prefer to do our own. And I think one of the things that upsets me the most in all of this is that in Smiths Falls, we don't have a rural school. We don't have a school where we don't have our children able to go. They're not at risk, but Levant does. There are little schools all over our countryside, backwoods, that if e-learning becomes something that that's going to take the place of their learning, that's where they're going to lose these little schools. And as much as they cost money to the taxpayers, they're much better for children than e-learning. And like Councillor Alford, I did kindergarten for a year. I gave it 2 days virtual, and then I taught my grandson on my own, because young children especially can't learn virtually. It's impossible. And, you know, it's, to me, I would really like us to support, exactly as the county did, this notion of making sure that we protect our schools that are in jeopardy because of this.
Thanks, Councillor Allen. Councillor Brennan, you seemed indifferent to it either way.
No, I have no problem with doing a resolution. We all have the same opinion. It's just I don't know if it's redundant or not, but I'm happy to support a resolution for sure.
Okay, with that, we've got 4 in support. I lean more towards Councillor McKenna on this one. Just I'm not hearing anything, but we'll bring the resolution to the next council meeting. Deputy Clerk Bennett, is that okay? All right, so that brings us to adjournment. Can I get a mover and a seconder? Chief Cheeseborough, did you have something before we adjourn?
No.
Okay, that was good. Sorry, was that moved by Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Alford? That committee adjourned its proceedings at 7:15 p.m. and stands so adjourned until the next duly called committee meeting. All those in favor? That is carried. So we'll take a quick break. Mayor Panko?
Yeah, I think we can probably be very quick, a minute or two. If we go on a biological break, that's fine. But I think we have simply one piece of business to look after, and any reports from council members.
And I need a seconder to my motion. Is it a motion or a bylaw?
Motion.
Anyways, Councillor Alford, thank you.
I need one too. Seconder. Thank you.
Mayor Panko, I don't think we should take a break. Let's just forward John. We'll be done this.
Yeah,
in
everyone's
less than-
ready? Okay, give me a moment to be official here. Okay, are we ready to forge ahead? Okay. Welcome to the special meeting of Smith Falls Town Council for Tuesday, October 12th. We have all members of council present this evening. No announcements today. I'll ask for disclosure of monetary interest. I see none. We have no delegations. We have no adoption of minutes. I will provide opportunity for reports. Any reports from members of council tonight? Yes, Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to provide an update from the Racism and Discrimination Task Force. I had spoken that there was going to be a community survey being produced from the task force, seeking input from all residents, asking about their experiences either towards themselves or that they've witnessed in the last few years on racism and discrimination. The survey's ready. It's being launched tonight or tomorrow morning. It's an online survey at Speak Up Smith Falls. It's also going to be available at hard copy at Town Hall and at the library. And I believe Deputy Clerk Bennett and her team have prepared a press release to that effect. And I encourage the citizens to fill out the survey. It will really help inform the work of the task force. So we're excited to be at that point, Your Worship.
Thank you. And just to finalize your comments, Councillor McKenna, it also will enable people to provide their comments in an anonymous manner, which we felt was the most inclusive method of proceeding with this. Okay, any further reports? Councillor Alford?
Not a report, Your Worship, but you mentioned that all members of council were present, and indeed, Councillor Dwyer had to leave.
I stepped away. Thank you. Thank you for the correction. I appreciate that. Okay, we have no bylaws. We have one motion, which is back to Councillor McKenna, please.
And I think I have it. I'm just popping it up, Your Worship. Sorry, I was switching here. I have it. There we go. So moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Alford that Council of the Corporation of the Town of Smith Falls award contract number 21-PW-018 for Beckwith Street Reconstruction Phase 2 to Thomas Kavanaugh Construction Limited. And further, that the council authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute the final contract agreement with Thomas Kavanaugh Construction Limited in the amount of $4,720,000, including HST.
Thank you. Discussion, Councillor McKenna?
Yes, Your Worship. Director Mcmunn provided a really good update on this in his report last week. The director and council is also, staff and council were pleased to have 7 bids on this important contract. All of them very close in their bid work. There was one outlier, and not only was Thomas Kavanaugh Limited the lowest bid, they were also probably, they met all of the qualifications of the bid and are certainly more than competent to start construction. And Director Mcmunn can correct me later this fall and through the winter once this gets awarded. So we're delighted to see the next phase of this and the next and final phase of the Beckwith Street reconstruction moving ahead. And there's a lot of other features about their bid that I won't go into, but the report is online from last week from Director Mcmunn. I'm not sure I left anything overly relevant out. No. Okay.
Thank you. And Director Mcmunn, I'll just put you on the spot for a moment if you sort of give us an idea of when we expect mobilization on this project.
Yeah, I haven't engaged Kavanaugh myself personally, just for the simple fact that I knew this needed 3rd reading this evening. So anything can happen as we know. So, but my understanding is that we will engage them tomorrow with an award letter. We'll get their schedule of works back along with the signed agreement for yourself and the clerk to sign. And I guess at that point, we'll know whether or not they're looking at ramping up this winter with underground work. So I don't have an answer for you one way or the other, but I can certainly engage council at the next meeting to give an update for sure.
Oh, great. Thank you. Any further comment? Moved by Councillor McKenna, second by Councillor Alford. The Council of the Corporation of Town of Smith Falls award contract 21-PW-018 for Beckwith Street reconstruction phase 2 to Thomas Kavanaugh Construction Limited. And further, the council authorized the mayor and clerk to execute the final contract agreement with Thomas Kavanaugh Construction Limited in the amount of $4,720,000, including HST. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Any inquiries or announcements? Seeing none, we'll move to adjournment with Councillor Allen, please.
Yes, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Brennan that this council adjourn its proceedings at 7:21 and stands so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Allen, second by Councillor Brennan. This council adjourns proceedings at 7:21 p.m. and stands so adjourned to the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor?